when people say, how did you find your community? I just had to become really visible, and I had just had to put it out there and say, hey, I'm doing this, and I had to be very aggressively myself. I wanted people to know what they were getting when they would come talk to me.
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library.
But like I mentioned, yes, we do have a lot of the traditional careers, but I also think that there's this sort of, I don't want to call it like hustle spirit, but there is a resilience and like a making things happen spirit with Afghans. And I think with a lot of immigrants actually, where whatever it takes, I'm just going to make it happen. And whether that means work for someone, whether it means start my own thing, but I'm just going to make it happen. And that is something that I really feel connected to. I never envisioned myself being an entrepreneur, but it's funny that I didn't think that, because all of the qualities of determination and collaboration and kind of thinking outside the box, we're not reinventing the wheel, but just sort of being creative and figuring out how you're going to solve a problem. I think those things are very Afghan. And so it makes a lot of sense to me looking back now.
Right. Okay. I wonder, is there a large community of Afghan in California or in the US? Are they generally kind of, gathering? Like, are there certain states where people tend to just go there because there's a community? And how did you find that? How important was that for you as you were growing up and, launching your career and socially and all of that?
Yeah, so there is a huge Afghan community both in California, in New York, and also along the East Coast in like the Virginia, DC area. There's Midwest Afghan. I mean, there's Afghans everywhere, but Fremont, California in Northern California is really well known as being a huge Afghan community. Um, Great restaurants. Um, and also in Orange County and in Southern California, near where I am, there's also a huge community. A lot of our family landed there as well. Um, so I had the experience of, I had no shortage of Afghans available to me, but I do meet people who say, hey, we were the only Afghans in our city that we even knew of. So it's across the board. I think people have different experiences. For me, I didn't have to go far to find them. Um, But again, I think as I grew up, the divide between my Afghan friends and family and everybody else was very strong. And it was only as I grew up, honestly, it was really through my work. I kept circling this idea of like, oh, you're misunderstood. Oh, you are a third culture kid. Oh, you're a child of immigrants. And I was getting closer. And someone said, why don't you do something for Afghans? And I said, why? I don't know why I wouldn't. I don't know. I thought maybe I was unqualified, or I said I don't want to act like something I'm not, which is so weird because that's exactly who I am. So why did I feel like that's not who I was? So as I reconciled my own identity and really got to a good place with it, that's when I really started offering the groups. And when people say, how did you find your community? I just had to become really visible, and I had just had to put it out there and say, hey, I'm doing this, and I had to be very aggressively myself. I wanted people to know what they were getting when they would come talk to me. And so many people said, yeah, I've seen Afghan things, but they're not like you, or like they're fine, but like I don't really connect with them. And there are plenty of people who didn't connect with me. So, you know, I have tattoos, and that's not a Muslim. You can't do that in Islam. I, there's all different qualities that people really needed to find their version of their Afghan culture. And so the people who resonated with me just kept finding me, and I just kept being like, oh my God, this was something I would never have said out loud growing up. And it was very healing for me to actually be very, very open with it. And then on top of that, to have people come looking for me and saying, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this. There's nothing like this. I'm really, really scared. I don't know who's in your group. Is it my cousins? Like, what kinds of things are we going to talk about? And so there was a lot of safety building There was a lot of very transparency and saying, hey, this is what it's going to be, which was hard for me as a facilitator because I was like, this is the first time I'm doing it. I actually don't know what it's going to be. Um, and so I'm always grateful for the people who have trusted me and continued working with me. And I'm also grateful for the people. It wasn't without its ruptures and people not being ready to do the work, or the group, other Afghan women not being ready to hold space. And we are really conflicted, and we do have our own stuff, and that stuff will always come up. So the other thing I often tell people who are trying to reconnect with their culture is, um, don't be put off if it goes wrong sometimes. We all have our own stories, and we all have our own experiences with our culture. And if you've been wounded by it or ostracized because you're too American, or because you're not doing it right, it can be really scary to go into a group of people from your community saying like, welcome, come on in. And you're like, I don't know. I don't know how much of this, I'm not sure. So I just say people, I remind them to find your people, and it might take some trial and error to do that.
Yes, definitely. So can you speak
Mhm.
to like what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with first generation immigrants and what the people that you're working with in particular?
That's a good question. I've been doing this for a while now, so you would think it was kind of at the top of my head, but um, I think kind of what I described about people wanting to connect but not finding a way in, and feeling discouraged either by the community, maybe not accepting their version of it, or maybe discouraging themselves and saying, like, well, I don't know enough, or this going into this space feels both very familiar to me and feels very foreign to me. And I don't want to be misrepresented, and I don't want to get it wrong, really. Um, and some people might say, oh, that's what people are dealing with, that's not a big deal. But it really is, because then it really affects how you go into other places in your life. It does affect how safe and secure you feel in relationships, or in a workplace, or just socially among your peers. So I think people often come to me because that's sort of that's not really what they want to work through in therapy or in a coaching group, but um, it does really color their experience with the actual more urgent things that they're dealing with. And they want someone who feels familiar in a lot of different ways. It's not just that we can share the language or share these memories of growing up, but also connects to the kind of like the American side of them, and the all the other parts of them too. I think another experience that people are really having collectively is so much activated trauma, not only from the past few years, um, of literally, just looking at through our phones and making sure we're hearing from family members and trying to help them in whatever way we can. Um, but also, it's activating kind of generationally. It's really hard to watch our parents and our elders and our families kind of see the same things unfolding. There was a reason why they left in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and now to see it again in 21, it's like, oh,
And
wow.
by that, do you mean like kind of a reversing of the progress that, for women, like when the US were there,
Yes.
forces were there? Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and even older than that, I think a lot of us feel that. And it's kind of this unsaid, unexplained feeling, but that generational trauma is real. And there are so many explanations of what that is. You open Instagram or TikTok or something, and everybody's telling you what generational trauma is, but I don't even really listen to those things. I think I listen to my clients, and I think people, there's an experience that once you realize, like, oh, that's what that is, that it's really validating. That I like people say, oh, I don't know, I just never really felt like I was fitting in anywhere, and I'm not really sure what that is. Am I just socially awkward? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. Or the ties to your generations of your family have been cut. And I grew up with people who were like, oh, that's my mom's house, and then my grandpa's house was right down the road, and then yeah, my family's lived in this neighborhood forever. And I'm like, oh, weird. When you hear stuff like that, you're like, oh yeah, I guess I don't know what my family's home looked like. So that can affect you.
That could be part of the trauma, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Leaving that part of the heritage and roots behind, and for you not having gone back. So I'm wondering, what stories do you hear your parents tell? What has their experience been coming over, quote unquote, like fleeing in the status
Hmm.
of refugees? Like, what's their experience been like, adjusting to US life?
Well, it's been so long for them. Um, like I said, they both came here before I was even born. So I don't want to say it's far removed because it's not. It's very present. But, I didn't. I'm actually realizing this right now as I'm telling you. I was gonna say I didn't watch them really have to adjust very much, but that's not true. I was watching them adjust and learn and um, make mistakes and be awkward and not know the rules and things like that. I was just really really young when that was happening, so I didn't know what I was looking at. But um, some of the stories that my family would share um, were really about really um, early childhood and the giant homes that they grew up in. Afghan homes are multi-generational, and I don't think we could comprehend the scale of like what the homes were really like neighborhoods. Um, and so many generations and extended family and people, and through marriage and then having kids, like so many people living together, and what a communal experience it was. And I hear a lot about the um, just the cooking and food preparation process. Um, and to be sure, also, um, you know, each of my parents had their own um, like socioeconomic experiences in Afghanistan, which is also quite diverse. And they're both ethnically had a lot of privilege in Afghanistan. Um, but yeah, I remember hearing stories about um, food preparation and family all being together, and I learned a lot about what education was like, and still even how important it was for them growing up. That's how I know it's not just an immigrant thing for us. It's really ingrained. Um, but one thing that we often, like my peers and I will share, is that um, dogs in Afghanistan were really outdoor animals, and they were really only used for hunting or for like guard for protection. And that's why every Afghan person not only thinks like having dogs inside the house is like so disgusting and dirty, but they're terrified. A lot of like elders are just terrified of dogs because it was like, that's not a pet. That is like a like threatening, violent animal. Um, so it's really funny because now even with like little poodle or like just whoever has like even a small dog, there's a running joke that people are really really scared of them. Um, so
Wow, that's funny because my husband and I are from the Caribbean as well, and we have the same sense. We grew up with either like the word is escaping me right now, like an area that's built underneath the house where the
mhm,
animals, the dogs would go. And
mhm,
so we're used to them being outside, completely outside, not in the
yeah,
house. If they ever come through the house, they're running through the house and they're trying to
mhm,
get out the other door, right? And so
yeah,
so for us, we're like, our daughter is talking about getting a dog. We're like, what? We really have to talk about this. Like, it's gonna mess up our clothes with the whole, how would we even manage it? Keeping this
mhm,
thing inside. It's just not a cultural thing for us. So that's
mhm,
interesting to know that you guys have feel that way too in your
yeah.
culture.
And you know what's even more funny is that Afghan hounds are like really dangerous hunting dogs, but here in the States they're like very posh, very elite. Like you have to have a lot of money to keep an Afghan hound, have it groomed. They're those dogs with the really long hair. They're very beautiful. It's my dream to have one, but um we see Afghan hounds as kind of like the French poodle, like, oh my God, this is the fanciest dog you could possibly have. And in Afghanistan, people just have packs of them and they are vicious, like mean dogs. So it's just, I just always thought that was funny, especially. Um, I
Right,
don't
right,
know because I
right.
really want one, but I need to have my estate. I need to have some room before I have dogs like that. So,
Right, right, right. Okay,
mhm,
so considering time, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your business, the clientele that you serve. You kind of alluded to that a bit earlier. And maybe if you could describe what it means to be queer, so someone listening can really to say, okay, is she really speaking to me? Like, what's her definition of being queer, and you mentioned a
mm,
second group, and then first generation immigrant women,
mhm,
immigrant women, and whoever else you serve, and how do
mm.
they find you?
Oh my gosh. Wow, you made it sound like I do so much stuff. I guess I do. I don't do it all at the same time, but yes, I really love the groups that I offer. Most recently, I was offering the eldest daughters group for people who are really parentified, and I don't need to tell you, if you're an eldest daughter, you already know that you become like a bonus
Yeah,
parent.
I get
Yes,
it. I'm one of them.
you
Yeah.
know what? Eldest daughters start podcasts and run businesses because that's what we do. It's like if you need something handled, that's who you talk to. But we are really, really bad. We're getting better, but we're really bad at like receiving help or like letting people do stuff for us because like
Oh
you're just
my
not gonna do it
gosh.
right.
So
Oh
here's
my god.
something that I've actually been thinking about and researching and asking question. This whole issue of being a high achiever, and what are we able to kind of stop it, and trying to get to the root of what's driving that high achieving, that always kind of sense of responsibility and duty. Somebody recently
Yeah.
that I interviewed said that she thinks that she's developed the empath, being an empath, because
Hmm.
you had to take on so much responsibility and be attuned to so many people around you, so you can read and absorb people's energies and be very empathetic, and what all that means. So that's a
Yeah.
huge ball
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. Because you're not only parenting your parents, you're also parenting your siblings. And if anybody gets in trouble, it's because why did you let them do that? I mean, we don't need to get into it, but that is one of the groups that I run, and that's open to any, that's not culture specific at all. Every culture in the world has eldest daughters, and we all go through similar things. Um, but so I do have my therapy practice, which is myself and other clinicians. That's Prospect Therapy. People can follow us on Instagram at Prospect Therapy and learn about all of our workshops, family therapy, individual couples, teens, groups, anything that we do that's therapy related goes through there. And we do offer a lot of services kind of at all different price ranges and different commitment levels. So if people are interested in just kind of dipping their toe into working on their mental and emotional health, that's where I recommend they start. And then personally, sarastanizai.com is where I put a lot of my own workshops, and when I'm collaborating with other organizations or other providers to do retreats or speaking engagements and things like that. A lot of my own groups are also through there as well. The nice thing about coaching is that it is not location specific, the same way that therapy is. We're licensed to practice in California, um, but with coaching, I work with people across the country. Um, so there's a lot of different offerings for people, but I think the overarching theme is if you are reconnecting with different parts of yourself, particularly reconciling your cultural identity, which is even more complicated if you are part of the queer or trans community, where you may not feel um, like I can't bring my culture into most queer spaces because they're just hella white and like nobody. it just seems it's not very inviting. Or conversely, sometimes in my cultural spaces, queerness is very taboo or even very dangerous. And so I don't bring that part of myself. And I really love that. I really love it. And I'm really proud that I've been able to kind of marry those two things. And you don't have to be one or the other. I mean, all kinds of people come to work with me and come to
Do
my
you,
groups and
do you
events.
mind? Do you mind kind of? I don't understand what that means when you say queer.
Yeah.
Can you kind of define it, like?
Yeah.
Because for me, looking at you, I see just phenotypically, okay, female, but then
Mhm.
you're using another term, queer, and I'm thinking I don't really even get that box. Like, how do you,
Mhm.
decode that for me, please?
Of course. So I use queer as kind of an umbrella term to include anyone who's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, asexual, intersex, questioning, anybody who is um, wherever they are on not only their sexuality journey, where they may not be read, they may not know how if they are gay or lesbian or bisexual, or um, maybe they do know, but they're not open about it, or maybe they've just been out and proud for 20 years. And then also the same thing with people on their gender journey. So if people are non binary, if they are trans women or trans men, or if they are not really sure, but something has never felt right, um, and they're really just trying to figure that out. It's very interesting. Um, so, my own identity, I'm a cisgender bisexual woman. So, I was identified female at birth, and I have always identified as a woman. Um, and I am openly bisexual, and I say openly because some people. It's not because we're not proud of it, but some people just don't have the privilege to be able to claim that publicly. Um,
Mm.
but
Okay.
it's really interesting that sometimes the same experience with figuring out your culture can also be there's some parallels with figuring out your sexuality or your gender as well. And so um, I think having all of those the understanding of all of those things can be really helpful when you're in therapy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are all my folks, and you don't have to be part of any one of those communities. But I think, like you said in the beginning, I don't have to know every detail about every single culture to be culturally competent. I don't have to learn the dates and the what what utensils do you use when you eat dinner. Like, I don't need to know all that. I do need to be humble enough to know that those things are different, obviously, but also how and why those things would matter. And I always take a second when someone says like, "Oh yeah, I see whomever. I don't care what culture they are." I'm like, why don't you care? Like, it matters. And they're like, "What does that have to do with their depression?" And I'm like, "Oh, it has a lot to do with it. Like, what do you mean?" And so you don't have to memorize all kinds of facts and figures. You don't have to know what every letter in LGBTQ plus stands for. Of course that helps, but what people are really looking for is someone who understands that why those things matter.
And I can imagine it's particularly complex and sensitive coming from an immigrant background, um, where I don't know, all I can think is colonialism,
Mhm.
imperialism, and I'm thinking religion, and a lot of collectivist communal communities tend to be conservatively more conservative, right? Or influenced conservatively, and so those sort of that group in expression can be very stifled, or like there's no space for that. So I can just imagine like what someone goes through, even having the thought that that might even apply to me, or how do I even make sense of this identity and what it means, and
Yeah.
even coming out in my community, and thinking about being ostracized, and ooh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and it's often seen as kind of a luxury, like your identity really doesn't matter. Like we're really just trying to survive. I really don't care about this. Um, yeah, it can be very complicated for people, and you can also understand why there are plenty of people um, who don't resonate with me and who I'm not the right person to help them. And that's fine. But I'm just going to keep being visible for the people who do need someone like me.
Yes, very good. Very well said. So I think you're also available on social media. I saw a lot Instagram and so forth
Hmm.
if people want to find your work there, your website that you mentioned, Sara.Stanizai,
Yeah.
and prospect therapy. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, learning about your past and your journey here as a child of immigrant parents
Hmm.
in California. I wish you practiced in Georgia. I
It's
think I
coming
reached out
soon.
and they're like, oh, we don't practice over in Georgia. You'd have to come to California because, I think there is conversations that can be had being for me being a first generation immigrant and identity and even within I consider myself being a straight female. I don't know if that's even the right term, but there's so much complexity even in that space when it
Hmm.
comes to surrounding sexuality and how post-colonialism and religion has affected how we express ourselves and things like that. So another conversation for another day.
I can't wait.
We thank our listeners around the world and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.